We're going to be representing them. Also, I'd like to make the motion be it resolved that following the presentation of the draft recreation master plan, the public will be invited to submit comments. All in favor? Carried. Floor is yours, Kimberly.
Great. I was just joking with the mayor that I feel like I'm on trial officially today. You have a unique sense of humor putting me in a courtroom. But just quickly, the Recreation Master Plan has a lot of information and I think a lot of interesting details. I won't be able to get through all of that today. I will touch on some of the key directions, the key items, and then I'll open it up to questions. So if there's anything that I've missed, I can address them in conversation. So just very quickly, what is a recreation master plan? Recreation master plans are municipal guidance documents. So they're strategic planning documents for prioritizing long-term municipal investment in facilities, programs, and services. So even though we do look at the stock of school supply, because the municipality doesn't own, operate, and doesn't have jurisdiction over those assets, the focus of the recreation master plan is on those assets that are within municipal control, specifically here in the town of Espanola. So our scope of work includes the regional recreation complex, including the arena, the pool, all the other components to that building, parks and recreation facilities, including waterfront space, programs, as well as services. We've gone beyond that and presented what we believe are some feasible implementation considerations, as well as a time frame for implementation within the document itself. The process has really unfolded over, I would say, the first 6 months of this year. So we started the project in January, officially. We had our first public consultation session in February 2017. A lot of initial research, background review was handled as part of phase one. We moved right through to developing the options for recommendations. There was a bit of back and forth with staff as to the directions and making sure that our language was clear as it relates to providing directives to council, to staff, as well as to this community. And then the development of the draft itself, which is before you here today. I would say that's about the spring, during the spring period. The final phase that we're in right now is community and council consultation on the draft before we subsequently finalize the document. Typically when you launch into these recreation master plan projects, there are a number of drivers of change. So for us, and these are just a few, the demographics, the shifting policy landscape, fiscal and economic priorities in the town of Espanola, as well as community quality of life considerations. So we can see, and we won't get into it today, it's certainly in the report, that the town has and is expected to continue to experience population decline. The older adult population, so the 65 plus age cohort, represents almost a quarter of the population. However, when we look at the youth and the children age cohort, young children age cohort, they're around 20% of the population as well. So that tells us that we can't be unbalanced and simply plan for aging. We have to plan for children, youth, and young families as well as part of this plan process. The National Framework for Recreation, a series of provincial recreation priorities, as well as the town of Espanola's own official plan and other related documents, prioritize an emphasis on comprehensive planning for recreation, but also quality of life, safe, healthy, and active communities, all of which are principles on which the document is based. Fiscal and economic priorities, I don't think there can be enough said about that. Once you are a steward of facilities and you are a provider of service, there are capital and operating costs associated with that. So the emphasis on the plan is to ensure that that occurs prudently over the 10-year time frame and beyond even. So I'll just touch on a few a few highlights as to the value of recreation to this community. And this is based on what we've heard throughout this plan process, but it's also what came through in 2016 with the citizen survey, which was a massive exercise. It was a telephone survey and over 400 residents responded. So that plus our community visioning workshop, plus the online survey that we had as part of the brief online survey that we had as part of this recreation project has been melded together to really create a picture of what we think are the community's priorities. So in 2016, of respondents indicated that they either used a recreation facility, participated in a recreation program, or a special event in that year. Over 35% said they used the trail, sports fields, and the swimming pool in 2016 and had priorities for youth programs, more walking and biking trails, and an improved beach area. What we've heard as well throughout the consultation as part of this process is the need to have year-round activities for all age groups. So that means creatively planning for your indoor facilities as well as your outdoor facilities, particularly around children and young adults. Affordable registered programs and drop-in classes, even summer classes, was a priority that came out, as well as the development of partnerships to accomplish this. And the master plan.
Can I ask you a question now? When you say 86%, it says use the facilities or special events.
Mm-hmm.
So if they said they went to any event at the town, like it could be a breakfast at the arena, would that count as using our recreational facility?
Without having been involved in the citizen survey process, I would say that everything that I've read in the document specifically links to a recreation event as it relates to this question.
Okay.
We can always clarify that after if you'd like that. So the recreation master plan, really building on what we've heard through the consultation, building on what we know are the assets and we know are the directives of policy, has outlined a vision for an active and vibrant community that maximizes its built and natural assets to provide exceptional leisure opportunities and quality services for residents and visitors. It outlines 6 goals. So building a healthy community, making recreation accessible to all, green space and linkages. I think that was a really big outcome of the consultation. So via active transportation and trail planning. Defining the town's parks and waterfront areas, and what the master plan has done is really categorize each and every single one of your parks. Your official plan currently doesn't do that right now. So we've laid out a framework of categorization for your parks and identified those destination parks, which across the province, they're typically those, that scale of open space that offers multifaceted recreation communities. They're significant in some way because they have waterfront access or it's a heritage park. But for whatever reason, those are the key park areas that should be prioritized for future investment. There's other parks that they're low on the rung. It's simply just a small parkette open space, maybe it has a bench. The principle being it doesn't need the same level of investment as a park with a sports field. So that's the clarity that we've tried to bring to the process. Maximizing partnerships for efficient service delivery, facilities, renewal, and investment. And I'll be able to touch on some of these as I go through the recommendations. The plan is based on, and its recommendations, and the goals as well, are based on a number of principles. Now, I haven't highlighted all of them. There's more in the document, but I've just pulled a few. Investment in recreation for resident retention and attraction, i.e. youth and families. Enhancing the utilization of your existing assets through investment, creative programming, and partnerships. Adopting an asset management approach, which we think is very prudent, to investment in infrastructure, as well as the development and implementation of policies and protocols that enhance the user experience with facilities, and a balanced approach to fee setting that encourages broad community participation in recreation, but which also has to recognize the value of the assets that you are currently a steward of. And I'll touch on that a bit more as I go through the presentation. So in terms of key recommendations, let's start with the complex and what we've observed, and I won't, just drill through all the stats that are already in the document, but this is an 18-year-old facility. It's observed to be in relatively good condition. When we look at annual primetime ice utilization, you're roughly at around 67%, which tells us that there's room for improvement in terms of actual use. For us, prime time is the measure. That's the peak period in which residents want the facility. We all know that arenas are typically not very active in the day. So we focus on that evening weekend use for ice when it comes to defining prime time, and that's standard across the province. Your pool recorded almost 2,000 booked hours in 2016, prime time similar to the ice. Fitness facility use continues to increase, so your memberships have actually doubled within the past 3 years from about 700 to 1,200 as of 2016. And from all that we can see from the current condition of the facility, from current prime time performance, really we think that over the next 10 years, the focus for this complex should be on enhancing utilization, the operation of that complex, and therefore the revenue generation associated with that facility. I'll touch on standards for a moment because they can be confusing to individuals, but basically what we do is we look at comparable standards for like communities across the province. So we don't expect Espanola to provide the same level of ICE as the City of Toronto. That's not the point. Smaller communities typically operate in a different fashion where they do provide ICE. They see it as a historic community need and something that should be retained. What we try to do with standards is give you a picture of where you sit in light of what other like communities and even the province has established as an acceptable standard of ICE provision. So currently you're providing one ICE pad per, let's call it 5,000 residents, the same for the pool. The typical standard that we would observe across comparable communities in the province is one ICE pad per 5,000 to 10,000 population, even as high as 12,000 depending on the community. For the pool, the standard's more significant, so it's one indoor aquatic facility per 15,000 to even 20,000 population. So based on the standards, based on current utilization, there's no significant pressure on your current arena, on your current pool to warrant investment in anything new or additional. Rather, it's telling us that the work needs to be on enhancing how that facility performs. So, key recommendations from the plan is within the immediate period of this plan, and that's the next 3 years, a building condition assessment has to be completed, a comprehensive building condition. It's almost 20 years old. That work hasn't yet been done based on our discussions with staff. It appears to be in good condition, but you have to have a detailed assessment of that complex to identify, one, what are the essential capital improvements and what are the non-essential capital improvements, and the capital costs in and around that, so that you can plan over a period of time, again, having a prudent asset management approach, what you want to invest in on an annual basis, what's essential, what's not essential, and really conduct, I would call it to be practical financial planning for that facility, so that you're not reactive but you're proactive as it relates to maintaining that building. Enhancing the focus on programming through really introducing new and active indoor uses potentially within your existing meeting and multi-purpose spaces at the complex. And I've just provided a few examples of what other communities are doing. These are all for consideration, and it's something that staff and council will have to evaluate over time, potentially in further consultation with the community. But you can see here that the City of Toronto, really in a meeting room that probably looks like the hall in the town of Espanola, has implemented an indoor playground as part of its community center to introduce a more active use to a space that would otherwise not be booked, not be rented for any other use. The town of Bracebridge has animated its lobby. This is actually the lobby area. So if you were to go to, we're actually working in the town of Bracebridge right now on their parks and recreation and trails master plan. It's a very long title, but if you were to move to the left of the building, you'd hit the indoor pool, and if you're to move to the right, you'd hit the community spaces. And then the lobby and reception area is all here. But what they've basically done is animated the lobby, so it's actually full of activity throughout the day with rock climbing. And then the town of Oakville in Ontario has really tried to enhance the dry use of its arena. So in the summertime, when your arena is typically closed, the town of Oakville has been a bit inventive in that it's introduced an indoor skate park, a temporary one that you pull down, and when it's the winter, it's all ice skating. So there are multiple approaches that can be investigated. We've suggested that the town do that due diligence. We've heard from some of the user groups that they're maybe even interested in an indoor BMX park, skate park, and that there are potential volunteers and community members that would be interested in seeing that happen. We do know that your current arena floor doesn't observe a lot of utilization, sorry.
Just finish up and then I have a question for you.
Yeah, sorry, I'm speaking a mile a minute. Doesn't see a lot of summertime use, so there would be the opportunity to improve rentals in that way.
The question is, the risk management that this would encompass, is it high? Like, is it a, it's a dangerous sport, so I'm just wondering what the risk management would be.
Yeah, I think that would be an interesting case study because municipalities have implemented it, and obviously it's a level of risk that can be managed. I think any sort of active indoor space use has a level of risk, even an indoor playground. There has to be monitoring. So a staff person in the room to ensure that there isn't an accident with a child. So there are considerations, operational considerations around that, and I'm glad you brought that up. that have to be evaluated based on the town's capacity and willingness to staff and ensure that that occurs over time.
Right.
But I think it's something that has to happen in consultation with the community. The truth is, there's risk even if it's outdoors, even if it's an
Absolutely, I
outdoor
do
skate
agree with
park.
you.
Yeah,
But the difference is, you're showing us places, town of
municipalities.
Oakville, look at the population they draw, so they would get a lot more usage,
Yes,
would help cover the cost of the risk management and the staffing.
yeah,
While in a small community, if you don't get enough usage and you put out a thing like this, and you've got 2 or 3 kids and you've got to staff it and have a high risk,
and this is touching on something.
you're naming some pretty big areas here.
And this is, well, just as examples, Bracebridge is actually 12,000. So it's one of the smaller, it's more rural, it's the Muskoka area, so it's a bit more touristy. So their year-round population is small. They only boom in the summertime. But they've still made the investment and they're planning a new arena facility at this point, potentially for 20. So there are opportunities and ways to go around it. When it comes to programming, and I was going to touch on it later, but I'll touch on it now, is we've decided that the trajectory for the municipalities first to see what the partnerships are. So we saw groups come out and individuals come out that said, I want to operate and run a program. I think it's the point of due diligence for town staff to have the conversations with those individuals, identify what are the dollars that they're willing to put into it. Are they willing to fund the infrastructure? Is it just a matter that you are simply a space provider and a rental and you reduce your risk in that way and that they're the ones that will provide the staff complement? Those are the kinds of discussions that need to be had. I'm not suggesting that you go out and you invest in this equipment and staff.
You look
I'm
for
suggesting-
partnerships.
Yes, I'm suggesting you look at the partnership opportunities to do
And
that.
I'm going to step back to Bracebridge, it's only 12,000. That's 120% bigger than us.
Yes.
And they draw an awful lot of tourists in the summer because of the Santa Claus thing. And those people go there with young families, and they're looking for things to do also.
Yes, but most of the year, it is honestly, it's the base population of 12,000. I understand
Oh
that
yeah,
they're
I know,
bigger.
but when you're looking at these summer activities,
Yeah.
if you're doing them in the complex or an arena surface, it's summer.
Yeah.
No?
The truth is, from what we understand of how the population is in Bracebridge, in the summertime, that sort of cottage industry, they're not necessarily there to use an indoor pool. They're really there to experience their cottage and their lakes and their outdoor experiences and the trails. So still, a lot of this utilization that we're looking at, it's actually local and it's regional. Because they are the only municipality that provides an indoor pool, and you're not in a different position in that you are really the only municipality within the Greater Sudbury District.
No, I
that
was looking
owns
more
that.
at the ice surface usage for that
Oh, for Oakville,
skateboard
point taken.
stuff, yeah.
They're smaller scales, but this is just for illustration because it's a municipal example.
I know you wanted to do questions after, but this kind of fits in right here with the discussion on the partnerships and stuff. And I would suspect, you seem to suggest in the report that the Recreation Planning Committee would be could be an asset.
Yes.
And in developing those partnerships, that might be a very suitable tool to have in place and use, because we don't have one.
I agree, and what we were speaking specifically of, again, it was later on in the
Yeah.
presentation, but no problem, we'll be able to skip that slide once we get to the end, is that you need to have the key partners in recreation service delivery in the room communicating on a regular basis, whether it's monthly or it's every 2 months, but really having a forum where the health unit, and recreation is very broad in its definition now. It includes culture, so it includes the library, it includes health services, other forms of community services. You need those individuals at the table discussing what their initiatives are, how they could potentially partner to really enhance and develop the programming complement. We've had discussions with the library throughout the course of this process. For obvious reasons, they are, however you want to cut it, sharing the same structure, and there should be opportunities really for joint programming. So we've had the discussion that where there are opportunities for physical literacy, there should also be opportunities for cognitive literacy and developing programs to accomplish that. I mean, to be honest, libraries are becoming more creative because they're recognizing that if they don't adapt, you can risk losing that base of membership. So they're getting creative with iPads and electronic education and other types of more health/recreation opportunities within their spaces because they know they need to adapt to the times. Can I move on? I know, I'm sure there are more questions. It's fine. We'll get to it all. Key outdoor facilities. So on the side of Saco, you have 2 soccer field locations currently. We did a test based on current utilization to see if you lost one soccer field, what would that do to the utilization? And we've come to the conclusion that there's going to be too much pressure on the remaining soccer field at peak time to be able to accommodate that demand. So the master plan suggests that you retain the 2 soccer fields that you do have, and they appear to be actively used during the prime time periods. On the side of ball diamonds, the master plan has identified that there's an oversupply. And I'll touch on a series of reasons as to that conclusion. When we look at the utilization, prime time again, so we've only assessed weekday prime time utilization as regular hours of use because we've identified through discussions with staff that really weekend use is for tournaments here. So rather than trying to roll those hours into our prime time analysis, we simply said that prime time is Monday to Fridays, 4 p.m. onwards, depending on whether the field is lit or unlit, because that changes the nature of play. Obviously, you have longer playing times on a lit field than you would on an unlit field. So we've considered all of that as part of our analysis, and across the 4 ball diamonds that you have at the Red McCarthy sports fields, you're at about 52%. We're not including the weekends. If it was another community, a booming GTA community, prime time would be all day weekends, as well as the evenings on weekdays. So that tells us that there's room, really, there's a lot of utilization room. Someone may disagree with us, but that's what we've seen from the numbers. When we look at condition, your ball diamonds appear to be in fairly good condition, but ball diamond C is large and irregular. So it actually has the least utilization of all the ball diamonds because of that fact. When we look at the standards of provision, let's say for an unlit ball diamond, the typical standard we would see across the province is 1 ball diamond per, I think it's 2,000 to 3,000 residents. You're currently providing somewhere close to that range. So you're looking at 4 facilities, you have around 5,000 population. For lit diamonds, you're I would say, depending on how you put it, below the standard, if that makes sense. So the typical standard we would see across the province is 1 lit ball diamond per 4,000 to 5,000 residents. So your provision standard indicates that there is an oversupply in ball diamonds. Does that make sense to everyone?
Mm-hmm.
Because you're roughly at around 1 lit and 1 unlit ball diamond per 2,500. You're not even in that 4,000 to 500 bracket. So that tells us that there's a potential oversupply when we consider the irregularity of and underutilization of one of your fields, as well as the standard, as well as the current utilization, which could be improved. We actually did a test, and it's in the master plan document itself. If you were to decommission ball diamond C, what would that do to your current utilization? And the numbers are showing us that that would increase your prime time use to almost 77, 80%, which is a good figure, considering that we're talking about the weekday use, not the weekend use.
Okay, so we're not changing any figures then? The figures are plugged in and they stay the same? So by removing one, it just increases the availability of what we already have?
Yeah, so what we've done is we've
Okay.
said, okay, you get rid of 1 diamond, but you still have those hours that you need to allocate. If you spread those hours on
Right.
ball diamond 4 over the 3 remaining ones, what does it do to the utilization?
Okay,
And we're seeing a good increase and a healthy increase.
all right. Gotcha.
So if down the road, if we did that,
If you did that, yes, because we
and
said
down the
subject.
road, we had our utilization was getting too high, we have the option of creating another lit, putting some lights on the other diamond to extend the hours.
Yes, you do. Now, in theory, the moment you light a field, you extend the utilization. It becomes a different, you're almost getting, I think, 2 to 3 extra hours per day. Because I don't know how it is in here. I think some of your lit ball diamonds, maybe staff can correct me, they're booked, they can be booked up till even 10:30, I
Something like
believe.
that, yeah.
Yeah, And I know that in communities in the GTA, you know, they can play till 11 if they want. Well, the adults will, the kids won't. But the use becomes much higher, yes. And obviously with 3 lit ball diamonds, if you're talking about tournaments, the opportunities are greater on each of those sites. No, we've said that please don't pursue that option until you have prudent public consultation with the user groups and the public as well. We recognize it as an opportunity, and that opportunity could, in theory, open up the open up a portion of Red McCarthy Fields for new improvements and even to introduce new sport. Now, I'll speak specifically about what we've heard, because we've done the consultation. We've heard from youth, we've heard from a couple of the user groups. And if you were to decommission that irregular ball diamond and reposition Diamond D, so you still keep your tournament campus field, you still keep all 3 diamonds going. Let's say potentially in future it's lit and it becomes, you know, this great complex for a long time, for long games as part of tournaments. You still have issues with the existing complex. You have a playground that's way too close to your active uses, to the point where staff saw the need to put nets up for public safety at this point. If you were to open up this portion of the site, you could potentially reposition and even enlarge and enhance the play area at this location. We've heard through consultation that there's a range of interest, and this master plan actually says that one of the principles is accessibility. It's not because it's a fad. It's because a lot of provincial policies, AODA, the building code, once you're reinvesting in new facilities, accessibility has to be a consideration as part of the process. So should you reposition a play area, that's the opportunity we think to consider what the opportunities are in some form or scale for a potential accessible playground. We've not recommended new playground locations as part of this master plan. In fact, we've recommended decommissioning one. I will get to that. But what we're saying is, if you're going to make better use of something you already have, then that's the time to consider what the future could really look like for the site. We've heard about, certainly from the youth and the individuals that came out to the public consultation, that having an outdoor skate park would be great. Maybe that has more liability from the municipality's perspective than an indoor one. But certainly there are options here on this site. There are options that we've seen across the province. So that beach volleyball court, which seems to us to be very underutilized at this point, could be more of a formal multi-use court for basketball and other activities. So there are ways to introduce new activities without investing in a new location and in an entirely new complex. It's really just making the best use of what you have. Now, this is just a concept. We've outlined the steps to really go through one public consultation on the potential to decommission a ball diamond. Should you have the public appetite for it and council is willing to proceed with that option, to move right through to site planning for the Red McCarthy Fields, so to commission a study in that regard, to identify what the preferred site development concept is and what the capital costs are associated with that. We've worked with many, we've worked on them ourselves actually, a couple of parks, different scales of course. Most recently Chapels Park in Thunder Bay, which is a massive park, but we won't get into that right now. But we know that this can be done, and it should be done prudently, and it will give you the opportunity to identify that preferred long-term vision for this location, identify the costs associated with it, and working with, potentially a landscape architect, work out a plan to phase that in a fashion that's more prudent and more feasible for the municipality, especially if you consider the fact that on an annual basis you keep having to keep tabs on future funding opportunities from upper levels of government. There's also fundraising opportunities. There's a range of ways to make capital projects happen. We're not there yet, but we simply propose the opportunity within the plan itself.
Just before you jump ahead, I know you talked, and a little later you're going to look at that one you recommended for decommissioning the playground. But I noticed in this one you said decommission, and you didn't say relocate. Did you come up with a plan if we did commission that one? Because you're only in one recommendation. You're talking about a different one, not this one. In decommission,
yes,
if possible. But you've also put that on this slide here, decommission playground. Did you come up with any other alternative for this one? Because you're only recommending the one that I read when I went all through this document.
Is it the Yocum one you're talking about?
Yeah.
Yes, so what we've in effect, what this is in effect saying is you're not losing a playground. In theory, you could simply reposition the playground with the existing equipment. What we're
This
saying
one
is,
here?
yes.
Okay,
What we're
but you
s-
didn't say that, you said decommission, you didn't say reposition.
Well, there is, it says
Right.
repositioned in enhanced play
Reposition
area.
is-
Oh, okay.
Sorry,
Can't read that.
it's a bit small.
It's in the
I
report.
apologize. But there's a myriad of ways to approach it. I'm not trying to tell you what the best thing is for the site because you have to go through the due diligence.
Mhm.
But I am trying to show you what the opportunities are, and if you have the opportunity to rectify what currently seems to be a concern as it relates to child safety, then that should be done as part of future planning. We can always come back to that. Parks and playgrounds. Needless to say, you have an oversupply of parkland. I'm kidding. But certainly a more significant base of parkland than we would see across other communities in the province. And to be honest, that's not unusual. This is Northern Ontario, and you have the natural assets. Therefore, you have a land base that's more extensive than other communities. Currently, you're providing 13 hectares roughly per 1,000 residents. The typical standard we would see is 2 to 4 hectares per 1,000 residents. Does it mean it's bad? Not as far as we see it, just means you have a significant outdoor asset base. Does mean you have room to play with a few things, so we'll get to playgrounds. You currently have an inventory of 6 playgrounds, so Pine Grove Park, Sherwood Park, Red McCarthy Fields, Algoma Park, Clare Lake Beach, and the Yocum Park. The typical standard, provincial as well as across municipalities, is 1 playground per 500 to 800 meters within the urban and built area of the municipality. We've illustrated really what the provision level of coverage, what the service level of coverage looks like for each playground based on the maximum and 800 meter radius. And just to put it in perspective, 500 to 800 meters is a 5 to 10 minute walking distance from a playground, which is considered to be typical. You're talking about young children, you can't expect them to walk 20 minutes to a playground. So when we look at coverage in what we would consider to be the core urban area here, the core built-up area, you have pretty good coverage with your existing playgrounds. You do have 2 playgrounds that they're outside of the built area as has been observed. The Yocum Park playground and then the Clare Lake Beach playground. We recognize within this master plan that Clare Lake Beach is a special asset. It really is, you know, probably the only public access beach linked to a park here in the town of Espanola. We know that it has historically functioned and to some extent still functions as a stopover spot for visitors on the road on travel. So you do want to maintain and in fact develop that beach with certain active uses, including a playground, or really just civic social uses, including a playground. We recommend within the master plan that you consider the option to decommission the Yocum Park playground. And I will just, before, because I know you're holding that question. Providing playgrounds outside of the urban and very built residential area is not best practice. One, it stretches your staff, it stretches your maintenance requirements, and those are the types of considerations. You may choose not to take this recommendation on board, but what we propose is that if you were to decommission through public consultation, again, because we've been told that there hasn't been that much use of this playground. However, the 2016 citizen survey seems to indicate that there's some level of use. We think there has to be public consultation to confirm what the level of use of this asset is. If it truly is low and insignificant, there's the opportunity to decommission the playground in this location and potentially dispose of this parcel for other uses such as residential and use the income from that sale to fund townwide parkland playground improvement reserve. So in essence, if you have a plan to move forward with, let's say, an accessible playground in a hypothetical location, having a reserve funded for parkland should be one of the mechanisms to be able to move forward with a plan of that nature, as well as other capital sources.
I see what you're saying about that one, but then when I look at all those catchment areas on the other ones,
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking at to the left side where you got the 3, and we got the
Yeah.
center one.
Yep.
It actually just overlaps 2, and I thought, we're taking one away that's isolated. And to me, that one anybody in that catchment area can use one or the other too.
We've thought of that, but we've heard that these two are heavily utilized, both. So the consideration there would be that you'd be taking away a playground that in fact is heavily used. We focused on the one that we understand to be the least utilized. So if there's further clarity that maybe staff needs to have on how well their playgrounds are used, then that's a fair.
Your heavily used, was that just through phone conversations?
That was
Or
through
was there
discussions
through
with staff.
observation?
That was through discussions with staff. We wouldn't, as part of this process, be able to observe use, certainly not with any significant time frame. And there's no counter at the park, so it's impossible really to be able to track that use, except that through maintenance, regular maintenance of the site, staff is able to observe utilization. And they're also the ones that when something happens, they have to fix something, and they know how much attention they have to pay to each playground based on utilization. Any other questions?
Does that include the school playgrounds as well?
No, so we've included the municipal supply
Okay.
because it gets a bit tenuous with schools. I'm not quite sure how it operates here, but I know that a lot of schools in Southern Ontario close the gates, and you actually don't have access to the playgrounds.
Okay.
But it used to, I understand it was different back in the day. I mean, kids could just walk onto a school property and use the play facilities, but that's not the way it is anymore.
Okay.
Because of liabilities.
Yeah, Safe Schools Act, all types of legislations and regulations. Vandalism, there's a lot of concern, so.
I know at one time here, and I'm not sure if that still happens, they used to let people at the ABL school use the basketball hoops there, and you'd see a lot of kids there in the evenings. I don't know if that still happens or not.
To be honest, it's a general municipal planning problem. I think municipalities would like to work with school boards in such a way that they can plan for the assets as one comprehensive whole. But school boards have a specific mandate, and they have their own regulations that they have to abide by.
And you're probably worrying about their liability, okay? And,
Yes.
mind you, some things like a basketball court or something like that, liability has to be a lot less than playing on playground equipment. But you never
We
know.
hope.
I wonder if I could ask you, since this is up here, if you could, in the final report, Exhibit 7 shows, which is not this one, of course,
Mhm.
it's possible, it shows the age group, what the
Yes.
age groups of children are in town. Can, in the final report, can you overlap this onto that as well?
Yes,
Thank
we
you.
can do.
And when you say heavy usage, do you have a kind of a number in mind that would be usage of a playground would be low, moderate, heavy?
No, we don't have a number in mind.
Because,
I
I mean-
think it's more based on times of use and volume.
Yeah, I know, but it's like 10 kids heavy usage if they're all there at the same time? Or it's 5 or 37?
I
Like,
don't have a
I don't
number.
know either. I mean, wear on equipment doesn't really say it. One kid could be very rough. No, I mean, I'd like to know some kind of a number figure. Like for so many pieces of equipment, would 20 kids be a lot, or would 5 be a lot if they're rough? I don't know. I
It's a complicated question. You also have to look at the duration of play. So if there's a specific playground asset that, after school, it's pretty much always busy from, 3 to whenever the sun goes down, then that would be heavy use, even if it is, 5 kids on the playground. If you have a park that people only use it for an hour here and there, if they, have nothing else to do, on occasion, then that would be considered to be low utilization. So for this, I'll just move on because I'm conscious of time. I think that's all been mentioned. We've also recommended that there be a playground replacement, and maybe with strategy is too harsh, but really a plan. What we found in other municipalities, I'm not saying this is Espanola, but there's been some significantly aged infrastructure. And the longer you leave your equipment, no doubt you open yourself up to liabilities. And we've worked in communities where there have been lawsuits over accidents on playgrounds, not because the child just had a regular fall, but because the equipment was actually, way beyond its time. So we've recommended that you have a plan to replace your playgrounds, and when they reach around the 14-year age trigger, that those facilities are phased immediately. That plan allows you to really think long-term. So you know when you purchase the playground structure, you can track and really pinpoint on the timeline when you likely need to replace a structure. Go ahead.
So this is the ideal time to ask, where does this 14-year number come from?
Well, it's typically been, it can be plus or minus.
Yeah.
Honestly, I think that each municipality has its own comfort level. We've seen as high as, I think, 15 years in communities in Northern Ontario. But this could be 10 years. I mean, we could work with staff to revise this, but generally we find, and it also depends on the equipment that you invest in, some last longer than others. This is just I would say it's a proxy, a timeline proxy. The plan could really be a bit more intense, but safe to say, I don't think 30-year-old playgrounds are what, we're moving towards.
So that's not a standard, but it is a,
It's a comfortable spot, is what I like to say.
okay.
We could improve this recommendation and put, say, 10 to 14 years if you want a range. But
Well, I want something that's accurate, not,
Okay.
I just was trying to get to what you use for a basis to come up with that 14 years. Is that
It's
what
what we
most communities see?
it's what we understand to be the typical lifespan
Yeah.
of a facility.
Okay,
So an
that's
arena
fair.
would be 50 years.
Yeah, yeah, no, I was more concerned on the playground equipment because of that 14-year, I mean, that's a hard number. I mean,
Yeah.
Where'd that come from? So no backup, okay, thank you.
So Clear Lake Beach, we've also identified just a high-level concept. We know that staff has done some work already to improve the site. We think there's more that can be done. There obviously has to be consultation around that location, but certainly the opportunities to enhance the visitor stopover and stay component is what we're driving at. So potential, gazebo or some sort of smaller civic picnic space, maybe more formalized parking, better signage, something to give the site a bit more presence. Again, subject to public consultation and an agreed concept on how this site should be developed, we think there's opportunities here. We think also that the opportunity to develop Clear Lake Beach is very much linked to the opportunities for trail development because of Alsea Court Trail. The current challenge that you have with your existing trail is it has no continuity, and it's relatively inaccessible to neighborhoods, and it lacks connections. And that's what we've heard a lot through public consultation. Now the issue is extending a trail along really a major arterial is difficult, especially with the truck traffic. What we have identified is the opportunity to potentially link destination parks identified in the master plan through going through the neighborhood area, which is a safer, more walkable, more pleasant experience for town residents. So moving from Clear Lake Beach, so this is all the existing trail, to Red McCarthy Fields, which, should a concept plan proceed for that location, will become a real destination. And you already have an existing, albeit small, walking loop at Mead Boulevard, so connecting directly into a walking loop here and potentially finishing with a small walking loop at Clear Lake Beach. We've also identified the future opportunity, because the recreation complex is so is nearby, to potentially enhance that, maybe as another phase, and maybe as part of an active transportation plan, something broader and more comprehensive. We know that, I believe it's the Waterfront Regeneration Trust that's actually moving forward with the regional trail network that will pass along Barber Street here in Espanola. There's opportunities, should you proceed with developing your local trail network, to link into that broader regional network and gain a bit of stopover traffic. Programs and services, and I'm going to touch on a few things, particularly the issue of fees, and then I think I'll hold off on implementation. Maybe I'll just touch on the key points for the sake of time and get right to continuing up with Q&A. So we've outlined a couple of recommendations, much more than we've shown on this slide, but just the key points. Enhancing the marketing and communication around recreation. So the development of a recreation guide for the town of Espanola. Hard copy, but most importantly, digitally available online. Really, you want the information to be accessible to residents. even enhancing service delivery and responsiveness through online tools like an online facility booking system, so that the burden and the onus isn't always on staff to take a booking, that can be done electronically and staff can focus their efforts on other activities. When it comes to the recommendation to undertaking a user fee study to confirm the true cost of service delivery for recreation, we think this is a very important point. And I'm going to touch on a couple of things that we've observed through the master plan process. First of all, we've heard a lot from residents as to the need for affordability as it relates to programs, as it relates to services, as it relates to facilities. We did a couple of things. So when we look at the department's cost recovery, it's at 25%, which strikes us as low because of what we've seen across all the communities. I'm not expecting it to be a GTA community, but we have seen 50, even as high as 80. Now, your service delivery plan for 2014 indicates that generally the municipality should be looking to achieve 50% cost recovery. So that was a separate study, not a part of this study, and it preceded our work. We can tell that as a department, leisure services isn't even close to that. So that tells us that there is a level of subsidy, and maybe even significant subsidy, in your existing rates. We then took another step and we went to look at your rates against, let's say, Greater Sudbury, which really is, the city of Sudbury, which really, that's where you're going to find the most comparable facilities with indoor aquatics as well as ice. So looking at the rates being levied, and really you're not too far Naval. Anyone in the town of Espanola could drive there to use ice and the pool, and probably do. Your rates, depending on whether it's the adult rate or the minor rate for pool, for the arena, it's anywhere from 30 to 50% less than what's being charged in the city. So there are a number of things we think that need to be confirmed. One, as it relates to your budgeting process, we currently don't have the ability to drill down on cost recovery by facility and the component specifically, as well as gaining an understanding of the true level of cost recovery for programs as a specific item. We think that work needs to be done. It's outside of the scope of the master plan, but this is something that you can work with a financial consultant and get that accomplished through a user fee study to really identify what is the level of cost recovery currently, where should you be. There's a third issue that I'm going to touch on. It's very multifaceted, the fee thing. But we've gone through your policies for ice allocation, sports field allocation. They categorize specific users, and those user categories aren't reflected in your current fee rates. So there's provision in your ice allocation policy for minor users, adult users, as well as corporate users. When we look at fees, there isn't a corporate rate, which tells us and indicates to us that potentially the rate being levied for a corporate rental, should it occur, is likely a subsidized rate. Staff can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that's the situation to date. It certainly was when last we observed that. That for us is not best practice. Normally a corporate rental is paying full market rate for ice. So we're suggesting this study needs to be done because maybe there are certain areas that you just need to tweak through policy, and those tweaks will have a trickle effect on your revenue generation for the facility. But making sure that there's a consistent thread through your policies right through to the way you categorize your fees is very important. Recreation, as far as I've seen it, has always had a level of subsidy. It really is what's a healthy level of subsidy for the town of Espanola. That's the question that needs to be answered. Some communities are fine with 50%, and they've satisfied themselves that they are providing an accessible service to residents. Other communities have decided their cost recovery has historically been 85%, and that's what we're going to maintain for the future. We don't want to set targets because we don't want to feel pressure. We just want to continue to maintain what we've already been able to accomplish.
Who would fall under these corporate users?
Corporate users would be any for-profit, so any company that would book a space for an event. So depending on, I'm just speaking hypothetically here.
So if they put on a ball tournament, or somebody did, whether it's a company or an outside user, a ball
Or an
tournament,
outside company.
a hockey tournament, those kind of things you're saying. Because they're looking for
a
profit.
for-profit user and a for-profit event.
Mhm. Okay.
We just think there's a bit of work that needs to be done there. Obviously, with this exercise, we're a bit too high level. We've worked on these user fee studies before, and it really, really gets very detailed. And you need to have established principles. You may want to continue, and it's done all across the province, to prioritize subsidization for minor youth participation and seniors. And your rates should reflect that. Your policies should reflect that. You might want your corporate users or company users, however you want to put it, to be paying the full amount of market rate for ICE, and everything from your rental policy right through to the actual charge rate should reflect that. So we're encouraging you to have that consistency right from the beginning. Reevaluate the joint use agreement with local school boards. I think that's something that needs to, there's a provision in the existing agreement to continually monitor that, but from everything that we can see based on current performance, the municipality is not using school facilities. There is a provision in that agreement, I believe, that says that the use has to be truly reciprocal, or should be truly reciprocal. So we encourage you to really have a look at that. Because right now, we do understand that there is school use of municipal facilities, but not the other way around, because municipal use on that agreement is during the summertime or the non-peak times, I believe, for access to school board facilities, because obviously board programming, school programming will always come first as it relates to those sites.
Sorry, I'll throw it in because I was gonna ask it anyway. Like, I've always had a problem with this reciprocal agreement because of what you've just said. What happens in other communities, smaller communities, in your experience? Do they have these type of agreements, or have they gone to where they're charging the schools to use the facilities?
You know what? Some places I can't say every community tackles it differently
Okay.
based on the problems. I'll tell you what I've seen. Some communities charge, it may be, I'd have to double check, it may be a subsidized rate, but they have some sort of working partnership that we generally need it at this time. Can you at least secure the time for the space for us? There's that approach. There's other municipalities that what they've opted to do is to co-locate with schools to create efficiencies. Now, I'm telling you that having worked in communities where they face problems with that is very tenuous because of the Safe Schools Act. So you can share a building, you can have a rec complex attached to a school, and you as the municipality can't access the community kitchen because it's shared with the school, and the school has a policy that says you can't just have public individuals traipsing through school space. That's a safety concern. So we face those situations where municipalities aren't realizing the full use of the facilities they've invested in because of that clause. Sorry, it gets very, very complicated.
Yeah, no, that wouldn't even be a consideration, I'm sure.
No,
And
you're-
then you have others that, they have an agreement for space use. Have I seen it specifically like this? I can't say yes, but I don't want to say no either.
That's fine. Maybe in the final report, we'll see you can dredge up a couple of examples
I think we
of
can do that,
something
yes.
that works somewhere, because this reciprocal agreement, it's only my opinion, but it's just not right, because it doesn't work.
Yeah, what we do know and have been able to ascertain through the help of Public Works is that, at least as it relates to the fields, last year, the school use time of your outdoor assets amounted to some $10,000 a year.
I'm not particularly concerned about the fields, because we have the fields, and the fields are gonna be maintained anyway. It's a consideration. I was really more concerned about the use of our indoor
Complex.
facilities.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know? Okay, so if you can add that into the final report, thank you.
sure. And we talked about the planning committee already, so I'll skip over that, but I'll touch on some aspects of implementation and then question and answer for the remainder of the time. So this is a 10-year plan. When it comes to capital, to be honest, it normally extends beyond the planning timeframe in any of these documents. It could be 20 years. We all know how long it takes to move from simple consultation to concept development right through to finding the funding and actually implementing a project. So don't let a 10-year time frame scare you. It's a time frame we're working with as part of this planning process, but you will have to make capital decisions on an annual basis. There's no recommendation as it relates to capital in this plan that's not going to come again before council before it's implemented. That's the process, that's the budgeting process for municipalities. The approach, however, to unforeseen capital requests is that this master plan, once approved, has to really be the core direction for the municipality moving forward. You've signed off, when you sign off on it, this is the priority. When projects come to the fore, that they compromise sites that are key to the master plan, or potentially sterilize other uses or conflict with the vision and the principles of this plan, we would suggest to you that those are not proposals that you want to entertain. Specifically, you have to also give consideration to capital funding. Can you take advantage of upper levels of government? Are there other sources of support, so community fundraising for assets? What are the maintenance and operating costs that are going to fall to the municipality? Because we've seen it before in other communities. Municipalities or volunteer groups invest in a project and they don't have the capacity to maintain the project, and it falls to the municipality because there's a structure associated with it and there's a public expectation that it's going to continue to be provided. So these are all considerations that need to be taken on board as you move through with implementation. But also you have to think about the appropriateness and the availability of your land. You want to really keep a tight rein on the sites that you're investing in, because the more you have, obviously, the more you will be required from you in terms of capital investment. And I'll open it up to any other questions at this point. I've thrown a lot of information out there, and there's a lot to consider. It is a draft. It is going to be out for public consultation for another 2 weeks. But certainly if you have any other questions that you'd like answered, or clarification, or other things you'd like to see in the document itself, we'll take those now. And obviously there's time for council to step away and debate and submit comments. Go ahead.
Yeah, I have a question on one of the things you were saying here relating to subsidies is to make sure that the cost systems really identify the true costs of running the arena, running the pool, running the weight areas, so that you can actually determine what level of subsidization you have for various parts of the recreation committee.
And there's ways probably to do it. Obviously, again, it's outside of the scope of this exercise, but having worked on them and with financial planning consultants, municipal finance consultants on this, there's a lot of work required in terms of acquiring your utilization data, so that if you don't actually know if your budget can't actually be broken down or is in any detail as it relates to rentals separate from programs, or if it's all lumped together, there's a way to break down the utilization and apply rates and come up with proxies. There's ways to do it. There are individuals, they understand, like a single pad arena would, in our experience, would typically, it depends on the size of the components, but we've typically seen that there's a deficit of anything from 100 to 200,000 on a single pad arena. Municipal acquired deficit. There's a certain range in terms of costs to run an arena. There are individuals that they're very experienced in looking at like for like and what the potential costs are. They can look at your budgets, they can drill down. There's a lot of work involved. I'm not going to tell you there isn't, but it will get you the answers that you need instead of 10 years down the line still wondering if what you're providing is acceptable. It also, I think, can put to bed some of the thoughts around affordability. Maybe you are truly affordable and you're heavily subsidizing. It would appear that way based on a 25% cost recovery rate.
Out of that, are there certain software programs or stuff that some communities put in to get a better handle on the assets? And okay,
I'll tell you, that facility booking system really helps, because I have worked in many communities with a facility booking system. So you go online and you book your ice. You pay for the ice online, so it's logged online. So that allows you to isolate per booking how much rental revenue or revenues associated with the booking you receive. So that's another way of cutting and carving the information. I know right now it's handled by staff and it's probably more of a manual input on their part, but what I'm talking about is individuals being able to book ice, from their laptop once the season opens, of course. But I've certainly requested those booking reports from other recreation systems. We have recommended in the plan that the town look at how it can enhance its existing system to have a more open face. You do have ActiveNet, but it also there with any technology, there are various versions and there are various features that you can purchase as part of any package. So the town will have to explore what's best for it and what it can do with its current system, whether or not it's a simple addition and a minor cost addition to that. That's something that needs to be evaluated. But I've generally found that in communities that have booking systems, I can request the full roster, annual roster of ice rentals. I can see how much time was booked, I can see how much revenue was generated, I can see how much ice was used, and I can see how much they had to give back because the ice wasn't used. So I'm able to break that down. Similarly for pools, similarly for meeting spaces.
Yeah, because we sell memberships and it's a membership, but we don't know right now who, out of that membership, how many times someone uses a pool, uses a weight area, uses a squash court. We may have an overall figure for the usage, but we don't really know or fundamentally understand how the memberships are used.
Those are the operational tweaks that they really help you when it comes to long-term planning. It helps you with budgeting. And it's just good to do, it's just due diligence, and you kind of just have to investigate it. For us, and as far as the master plan is concerned, those are things you do in the short term. That's the low-hanging fruit that you tackle in the short term. The capital stuff will unfold over time, and yes, it's bigger dollars, but you can stretch it out over a longer period. But there's a bit of due diligence that you have to do now within the first 1 to 3, even the first 1 to 5 years. Get those internal processes right.
Sure.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, can I go to him first, because he didn't.
Yep, go. Anyway.
How do we address, or give me some ideas of how we're going to address the senior population in our community? Because 60 to 90 is 20% of our population. I think I got that figure from your own report here.
Yes.
And how do we address them? Because they don't have a pocket full of money.
Yes. So, and I'm smiling at that because we've dealt with this in so many communities. First of all, having a user fee bylaw, but not only that, a policy associated with it, allows you to establish a principle whereby you may want to subsidize the senior population, and even to a greater extent that you subsidize the adult population. And that's fair, but you have to put it through policy. You have to accomplish that through policy and have a structure for that. Also, if you take an accessibility approach to planning for any facility, you therefore plan for the older adult population. So if you're looking at, even with trails, even if it's having a wider trail network for accessibility, you're catering to seniors, having walkable neighborhoods, catering to seniors, having partnerships, so having the health unit on that planning committee and developing new initiatives and programs are going to expand your opportunities to target the seniors population from a health and safety as well as a recreation perspective. So you can do it through programming, you can do it through facility investment. Facility investment, I have to just say, will always be slightly more expensive because it's capital, but there's so many ways to do it.
Okay.
But most of it would be right in the fees, wouldn't it? Like, I mean, you can go into a restaurant and you get a senior's rate.
Yes.
You see the cities, they have a senior's rate for buses.
Yes.
And that's how most of them address the senior population.
That's how quite a few do. They'll have an older adult rate. They'll have older adult programs. They will have older adult, subsidization policies.
But it's actually trying to entice them to utilize the facility that
Yes, it
becomes
is.
difficult.
Yes, it is. So what I've seen in other communities, I'm not sure about some of the networks we have here, is, let's say, and I don't like to use big cities, or I don't like to use Southern Ontario cities when I'm talking to Northern Ontario.
We don't like
but
it either.
it's still, I know, that's why I don't like to do it. But I know that the city of Vaughan has a special older adult policy or strategy. And what they basically do is they have heavily subsidized rates for seniors. And so seniors, a bridge club can book a room for a very low rate and they can spend just all day there, just having their activities. Other communities have invested in older adult facilities. Those are complicated depending on how you define them. Sometimes it works really well, other times it doesn't. Again, you have to tap into your community and you have to look at what you're willing to invest. If you have, let's say, a hall and it's not very well used, but maybe there's a seniors group and they would love to host a bridge and Scrabble club there 3 days a week, in the typical dead times, but it's too expensive, having a seniors rate or even a policy around subsidizing older adult programming will help you.
See, we have a seniors organization, and they have that room down at the hospital complex. And they, I think it's utilized pretty well every day.
That room is in use 7 days a
7
week
days a week,
from
yeah.
9 o'clock in the morning until
Yeah.
at least
So-
6 every night.
That they
It's
play
well
cards,
used.
they do, they have
Yeah.
luncheons, they have all kinds of things, so.
Activities
I think
always.
what Ron might be alluding to is to use our indoor facility.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think, lowering rates is also an incentive.
Yes.
I think it's the
I think you
programs
need to
too.
get, I was just gonna say, it's programming that's more geared to them people.
And again, that partnership committee with the health unit, like, a lot of communities have done seniors aquafit. It's linked to the pool, and then afterwards, there's a linked activity, there's certain packages. It's more of a, it's a package deal, because when they go all the way to the recreation complex, they don't wanna have to, turn around and travel a distance within an hour. They want to come somewhere, they wanna be able to stay for a while, they wanna be able to enjoy multiple things, and then go home.
And that's what the seniors facility actually now, it's attached to the hospital provides.
Yes.
All one stop for a while.
Everything, yeah.
Except, of course, aquafit. And a library.
Unless it's.
But herein is the opportunity,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So creating those, packaging your seniors programs in such a way that they enhance the value proposition of visiting the complex. I think really the master plan is positioning that the complex needs to have a future as a community hub. It needs to not be seen as a place to drop off your kid for hockey. It needs to be seen as a place you go to because you can have one kid doing on the ice, mom and dad's at the gym, and some I don't know, learn to play squash or something like that.
Or one in the library.
Yeah, or another one in the library. Again, and some of it's physical, but some of it's just pure programming. Yes.
So I do have a couple of questions. Well, one, I think we should probably, because you rightfully so make a point on the asset management side, but we have, I think, Cynthia, we will be having the building assessment done, eh? So that is something you wouldn't know because that is just very
Okay.
recent. So maybe a report needs to reflect and you'll have to get the details on that, what's gonna happen. But there is actually a building assessment and facility assessment going to take place.
Okay.
So the report may as well reflect the most up-to-date
Yeah.
status on everything that's gonna happen. That's just in the last 2 weeks, so that's how.
That's probably why.
You wouldn't know.
We have, however, recommended that continue regularly.
Yeah,
Every 5
and
years.
that's,
Yeah.
we've encouraged and are encouraging an active asset management plan is fully supported, so
Yes.
I think you'll see that continue, but anyway, there's something that's gonna happen. On page 5, and this is just for clarity,
Mhm.
you refer to the disposable income spent on recreation. I'm sure that you're referring to, when you say that it's comparable to Sudbury and other areas. You're counting not just recreation as recreation within locally, it can include things that people's camps and so on and so forth.
Yeah, it's recreation's a bit broader in this
Yeah,
definition.
and that's fine.
Yeah.
And in page 6, I won't worry about that.
The
one.
per
I'm not gonna
capita
worry-
spending?
Yeah, I'm not gonna worry about Cochrane. But you use Kappas casing as an example, even though it's got a much higher population. And again, for clarity, and that's because the facilities are equivalent to what we provide, isn't it?
Yes, it's
Yeah.
because those communities are northern,
Yeah.
one, they're also providing something comparable, so indoor aquatics as well as indoor ice. And therefore, we could expect that the spending is going to be in a similar ballpark. The
Yeah.
numbers aren't necessarily similar because in actual dollars, Espanola is 1.6, Kapuskasing's 2.4 million, Cochrane's 2.6, Hearst is 1.7. So the numbers differ, but on a per capita basis, it sort of equals out a bit more.
Okay, and then, well, since you brought up Cochrane and its high cost, we know from the service review that Cochrane actually has a much higher number of employees than we do, or even the others do. So I suspect that is where the higher cost, so that's just a little thing.
Just
So
a
on
reminder
Exhibit
when these guys
16,
ask
on
questions
page
too,
18,
right?
you made the point right at the beginning that our population is historically is declining. And yet that's not what you're reflecting there in 2021 to 2036. You're reflecting an increase in population.
Yes, so let me explain that. The 2016 figure is based on the 20 census actual, and it's point taken, it's clarity we can bring to the chart. The forecasts, however, are based on your official plan.
Okay.
No, your official plan was done just before the census release. Well, not really, it was 2010, but, so it was based on the old census data. Your projections actually forecast that your 2060 population will be higher than it actually is.
Yeah.
So that's where the difference comes from. The
Oh.
trend, however, as it relates to your forecast is.
Well, yeah, and your report demonstrates that the trend is against. So which official plan, are you using the draft official plan that's underway now? Or have you used the 2010 plan?
2010, I think she said.
I think it's the 2010.
Yeah, okay, because there is reference somewhere along the way to the draft official plan that's underway
Okay.
now.
It said official.
So we could just
Right.
clarify that, because it's misleading, because we've got it looks like a contradiction, although I knew it wasn't,
Okay.
okay? But it's providing what looks to be a contradiction. And on page 26, can you just explain what, in your recommendations, what is target standards for facility provision?
Mhm.
What does that translate to?
Is that 26?
Yeah, page 26. And one of your recommendations is target standards for facility.
So in general, target standards, I'm wondering if I have a different. But in general, target standards are those standards based on what's comparable across the province that we believe we should be aiming to keep in line with. So let's say the standard for ice indicates that you don't need another ice surface. You don't need a second ice surface. You can function perfectly well with one. The future, and I'm not saying that this is the future, shouldn't be to proceed with a second ice surface considering that the provision standards, unless there's some extreme, demand or a need. We don't believe that there's a case for that. So we've outlined the standard as a guide. Standards are really there to indicate numerically when you should start to be thinking about investing in new.
But the target standards was like what Bob is saying, was those graphs you showed us a while ago,
Yes.
like one ice pad for this many population,
Yes.
2 diamonds for, that's the target standard.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what I thought.
So if you find yourself and your one ball diamond per 6,000 and the standard's at 5, then maybe you need to be thinking about investing in another ball diamond. That may never happen, and the
No.
population trend is telling us that
It's
that's
never
likely
gonna
not going to happen. So we put those there, and standards, again, they're only one part of the equation. They're just mental markers for you to know when you should start thinking about triggering investment.
And I now have one last word, if you don't
Yes.
mind. With your experience around the province, and in this case, you can refer to Southern Ontario, although it's just this one time.
Don't allow
I
that.
think the smaller communities, or even the larger ones that have developed successful community group and private sector partnerships, is there any really good examples of that? And especially ones that may have come up with something that's a little bit outside the box?
For facilities or programs?
Yeah, both programs and facilities, but especially to drive usage on the facilities. Some little thing that somebody hit on that really worked well. It may not work here, but,
Yeah.
and I don't ask you for an answer now. If something
Yeah.
comes to mind, you could maybe tuck it in as an addendum or whatever.
Yeah. I'll have a look at that. I can't say I have an answer right now. I know
No.
that when it comes to arenas, okay, so the aquatics is very difficult for public-private partnerships.
Yes.
The return on investment is just not there. Aquatics runs a higher deficit than an arena.
Yep.
An arena, though, can be profitable from a private sector investor perspective. So the models that you will see, I don't know if they're applicable here, but certainly when it comes to building facilities or even operating a facility, you'll see a private operator get involved in an arena because they know they'll make a return. So they sell the ice, they do the rentals,
Yeah.
everything like that. It's just not the same for pools.
No, well, we get that with the pools. I mean,
Yeah.
that's the way they are. But I was really looking for increasing utilization, if you like. If there's somebody has little ideas, why try and reinvent the wheel if somebody has already found a better mousetrap over here that actually
Yeah.
works? Maybe it won't work here.
Yeah.
Just looking for examples.
Okay, I think we can look at some examples.
Thank you.
I have just one more question. One of the things I was hoping to get out of this is how techniques or ways that we can maybe get other communities. We got a lot of people attending our complex from outside the community. And what are some of the ways that communities are using to get some input or dollars from residents from outside the community are using it?
Let me tell you, I've talked about this so many times with regard to this project, having gone through the facility and its performance. When I first started on this project, I assumed that the understanding I had, and it was very preliminary and probably not very well informed at the time, was that regional use of the complex was for all components. Looking at the utilization and discussing with staff, regional utilization is really for the pool, because there are ice options elsewhere, and even as it relates to the communities on the island. I mean, there's ice options elsewhere. Maybe it's cheaper, not sure. But the draw is really the pool. So the challenge is you have a facility that has been operating for a number of years, and really there is one primary component, that's the attraction. So that makes cost sharing and discussion of cost sharing with other municipalities difficult. The other ways municipality approach it is through the user fees. That's why the user fee study is very important. Other municipalities have implemented non-resident user fee charges. And there's ways to implement that, and there's ways to do it effectively. Every community has a different approach. Do you stop getting some usage? Maybe, but how, considering you're like the only pool in the district, unless you want to drive all the way to Sudbury, you're probably going to maintain the majority of your utilization. There's nothing from our rate analysis that tells us that your rates are exorbitant anyway. So I think that's one aspect you could look at. I don't think you can brush non-user fees onto the table. Non-resident user fees onto the table, because the cost sharing discussion may be something that should have been had earlier.
Fair enough.
Okay, thank you very much.
I don't know if there's anybody out here that wants that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I'd like to put an idea forward where, when you come to making a new thing for recreation, that you have a fund already set up, and so that you can draw from that fund to get this project going. And for instance, a canoe ramp at Clear Lake. It's kind of hard to get or launch a canoe, but if you just dug a trench that was 4 feet wide, the water would be level, and you could set your canoe in it and get in it safely, and then push out into the lake. And something like that wouldn't be too costly. But if you had a fund already set up, that you put in so much every year, or the profits from one area go into your, for different ideas.
I don't think there's profits there in recreation. I don't think we have any profits.
No, there's no
But what
profit.
you're saying is those proposals, right, if they ever came out from a group or yourself, they would go in our budgets under capital.
Yeah, but it would be for some, somebody put it off the out of the block idea that somebody comes along with. You already have a fund to start.
Reserve funds you're talking about.
Yeah, yeah.
But if you ever have ideas or anybody
Yeah.
in the community, you present it to council, and of course, they would end up probably brought
Yeah.
up at budget time for funding.
Yeah. I don't know, it's just an idea.
Got another gentleman.
Hi, sorry, Jack Miller, I'm from out of town, in town today. One question and then a comment. purpose of the study that you've just done was,
Are you answering?
Oh, you mean the recreation master plan?
yeah,
It's really to provide a long-term planning timeframe and priorities and recommendations for investing in facilities, recreation facilities, programs and services. So not the library
okay.
or anything.
Because that's what it sounded like to me, was the focus was on utilizing, maximizing what you got. Okay. My comment is, that's a good plan. What I've seen from my experience from other communities is, can really consider what other people are doing. Even when you were talking about seniors, you've already got something happening with them. Maybe you don't have to do anything, because somebody else is already providing that. And I'll give you some examples. Sturgeon Falls has a great little recreation complex area that was developed over time, and the city did it. A successful, the city did. The one you talked about in Gravenhurst was a joint effort, I believe, because you've got the city involved, you've got a pool, you've got a fitness area, if I'm talking about the right one, the high school attached,
Yeah, Bracebridge,
right, and the gymnastics community in there
Yes.
as well. So
via lease, yes.
yes, you leave, okay, so you got a joint one there that was done very much with the city. Some other ones that you want to look at would be, I would say, look at Valley East, because Valley East has the, back in the day, some of you might remember the White Elephant that got built, but it turned out to be a pretty good complex. But if you look at it carefully, not too far from there is a little place called Valley View Community Church that puts through 400 plus kids a week at no cost to the municipality. It's a private enterprise. The church is renting the space. So I'm just suggesting as a council, don't dabble in stuff you don't need to. If there are people that are willing to commit, by the way, I'm one of them, that we're quite willing to come back here and do some gymnastics again, we just haven't found a building yet, or a builder. But there's some stuff that you can do and you should focus on. Your pool is definitely one. Maximizing the use of your fields and all the stuff you've already got. But if you're looking at increasing general recreational use overall for your population and the surrounding population, then look at what people are looking for and who might be able to provide that for you so you don't have to take it on. I think it might come under your partnerships, but again,
Yes, it does. Can I ask you a question?
sure.
Would you be interested in using the dry arena floor for gymnastics?
I am right now.
Oh, you are right now.
Yeah, I got a little bit of space. I rented it from you at a very economical rate. Thank you. Another day I'll talk to you about that. You don't have enough time, really. My ideal coming in here for gymnastics is to have a full, because we had 150 kids here before doing gymnastics. So mine would be to get a building and set up permanent. And I'm looking for partners too. I'm looking for, not you guys. I'm looking for like a dance instructor, another sport that would work with us, because I can't justify a building for my one sport.
Yes.
But so the complex that I'm in the valley, we do gymnastics, martial arts, dance, there's a fitness guy, oh yeah, there's a church together. So an old school that we've converted. I can't wait for your schools here. They seem to take too long to make up their mind what they're doing. And I understand they've run into another glitch with oil or underground tanks or something. So, no? Oh, somebody's spreading rotten rumors then. Okay. But just from my perspective of having been around, and actually you can even look in Dowling, because there's a little bit of a joint thing there.
What was that?
Dowling, which is greater city of Sudbury, but north. Because when they built the new complex there, when Onavie Falls built that new complex, sort of like yours, they converted an old arena to, there's a jogging track, there's a couple of squash courts, there's a dance hall and everything. But they did make room for one sport, again, mine, gymnastics, to be in there as a joint use thing. And so sometimes you can make use of partners
Yes.
strategically that will help draw, so their draw brings parents in
Yeah.
who can't. They got to do something on the way to their kids. So again, my point was, really work on what you've already got as facilities. And maybe some of the other stuff, you could just look at getting good partners or soliciting or helping guys like us to come in.
Yes.
How can you help us come in and provide what you're really not expert at anyway?
Or you don't want to be involved in anyway.
Well, you know, like
Yeah.
we've already got the liability. You were talking about liability on the skate parks. I'm in Azilda, Chelmsford, they've all got skate parks. So somehow the city of Sudbury has taken that liability. There's nobody there. There's nobody there. So British Columbia has parkour outside.
Yeah.
And they took that liability on. I have a hard time getting insurance for parkour. So I guess it can happen someplace and somehow if it's set up correctly.
I'll add to one of the examples you gave. So the city of Timmins, recognizing that they had one ice surface too many, basically took the ice out of an arena, the sportsplex, leased the entire facility out to the gymnastics club. And so that,
And there's a
boxing
boxing
to the back, yeah. So it's all lease, city owned, but at least it's more affordable for the gymnastics club than
Yeah.
a new building. But it's fully, it's always active.
No, I
Can't walk on the floor though, all the mats.
Sorry?
You can't walk on the floor though, all the mats and the apparatus. But they've done a good job, it's always active. Any other comments? Yes.
I'm talking about liability insurances, and we hear that all the time. That seems to come up in the conversation. And I've truly been around the province looking at parks, other communities, skateboard parks. We heard that at your meeting. We heard about splash pads. We heard about all-inclusive parks. Other communities are doing it.
Yeah.
There's just in St. Marie, there was a bunch of young boys on a bicycle ramp park, I don't know what you would call it, in the line of a skateboard park. I went over and talked to them young boys. They were all probably 15 years old. Chatted with them. They live there at Sault Ste. Marie on that bike path. And I said, well, what about scrapes and bruises and it's all asphalt. Well, that one come 2 weeks ago. This one, all my knees are all, they were happy. They were having fun. So there is liability. In the snowmobile industry, we went through that huge liability issue and we developed a risk management plan and we made insurance possible in the industry for the province. I'm sure our community can come up with the same thing for these parts.
Yeah, and around liability, I don't want to stay on it too much because there's a bit of probably more detailed research that needs to occur with how municipalities specifically implement it. But I think there's a level of understanding of the risk that an individual takes when they want to hop on a skateboard and jump around. There's a conscious decision by an individual. Now, if the accident is because you didn't repair the skate park, then that's a whole different issue. And that's an issue with liability. But I think there's a certain level of play at your own risk that comes into play with implementing these facilities. But definitely there's investigation.
Exactly what you're saying. I was part of that risk management process in the snowmobile industry. And yes, there is. We had to document everything that we did, our times and all of that. It just drastically reduced our premiums in the insurance industry.
Yeah.
Just for that simple reason. And we were close to losing everything in the snowmobile industry 15 years ago.
All right, we'll call this special meeting of council adjourned. All in favor? Carried.
Yeah.
I want to thank you, Kimberly.
Take care.
Good job.